In a rail yard, the fastest route was usually the one someone wanted you to take. Cassia Reeve knew that before the military medical evacuation train slid into the NATO border platform exactly on schedule. Lights on, engine breathing low, white-blue lamps flattening every face into the same tired mask. The medical car opened with a soft hydraulic sigh. Warm air rolled out first. Then, brake heat. Then the too-wide echo of an empty metal space. The bunks were bare, except for strapped blankets, still shaped by bodies that were no longer there. Equipment ran in its brackets with nobody to serve. 19 evacuees were supposed to step down. None did. At the far end of the platform, a man broke into a run. Too clear under the lights, too separate from the clutter, too willing to be seen. Cassia had him in the open. She did not fire. Rivet's harness shifted hard against her hand as he refused the car and angled toward trackside air. Nola Katie looked past the empty bunks to the floor. That car is too clean. Captain Darren Holt's clock started bleeding minutes in Cassia's earpiece. The station clock above the platform did not care. It clicked on, bright and official, while 19 warm spaces in that car cooled by the second. Holt was already ordering the platform sealed, his voice tight enough to cut itself. He wanted the runner down or boxed, wanted the crowd held back, wanted the missing counted again, as if numbers became kinder when repeated. Cassia watched the man run through the white-blue wash, his arms loose, his head forward, his path clear of carts, stretchers, and panicked staff. A frightened man looked for cover. A guilty man looked for exit. This one looked like he had been placed where every eye could find him. The line looked almost polite. That was its flaw. Rivet checked back once, ears sharp, chest working, then pulled a half step away from the open medical car. Not toward the runner. Not toward the platform doors. Toward the rail gap where cold air moved under the stopped train. Cassia lowered her breathing until Holt's voice became just another piece of rail noise. Nola crouched at the car threshold without stepping in. One gloved hand hovering over the floor, as if touching it too soon would lie to her. A blanket strap trembled faintly from the train's last motion. No one had grabbed it in panic. No one had fought the narrow aisle. Cassia, Holt snapped, you have a clear shot. She could hear men shifting around him, boots on concrete, discipline clicking into place. Nobody said legend. That was something. Rivet leaned again, harder this time, and Cassia felt the tension travel up the lead into her wrist. The runner crossed a bright lane and gave her his whole side. Too visible, too timed, too helpful. She kept her finger quiet. Too easy. The two words put a bad kind of silence into the radio. Holt swore under his breath and ordered 2 platform guards to move. But Cassia was already watching the space beside the runner, the dead area beyond him. The pockets of shadow that had not reacted when he did. Nola stood, eyes still on the car. No scuff panic, she said. No bedding ripped loose. No bags dumped. 19 scared people don't leave a medical car this neat. Cassia did not answer. The train's floor still hummed faintly through her boots. The runner stumbled once and looked back too late, like an actor remembering fear after the cue. That bothered her more than speed would have. The runner reached the far service steps and stumbled just enough to be convincing. One guard started after him until Cassia cut a hand low. The man stopped, angry and scared, which meant he could still learn. Holt did not like it. His containment line tightened around the platform, rifles and flood lamps aimed at the visible problem, while the invisible one widened under their feet. Cassia gave Rivet slack, not release. He lowered his head, sampled the cold trackside air, then checked back with the controlled uncertainty that meant work, not revelation. Nola moved to Cassia's shoulder and looked where the dog was looking. For half a second, neither woman spoke. The medical car behind them sounded too broad, too hollow, too recently emptied. Holt demanded her reason. Cassia gave him only what he could use. Hold the platform. Do not chase the gift. He hated that. Gifts usually came wrapped. This one had legs, a clear lane, and no fear where fear belonged. Somewhere under the service bridge, below the platform for edge and away from every rifle pointed at the runner. A small knock answered from beneath the concrete. The knock under the service bridge was small enough to hide inside the train's cooling frame, which was why Cassia trusted it more than the radio. Big sounds were generous. Small ones made people choose whether to listen. Holt's channel filled with overlapping voices, guards reporting the runner, medics asking where to stage litters with no patience, someone insisting the manifest still showed 19 confirmed aboard. Cassia touched the transmit key. Cut the chatter. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. The channel thinned to breathing, boot scrape, and the long dead hum of the stopped medical car. In that thinner quiet, the platform felt larger and less protected. She gave Rivet 2 inches of slack and kept the rest in her palm. He did not pull toward the platform exits. He worked the edge, nose low, shoulders tight, then stepped down beside the rail bed where the ballast began. White-blue light ended there in broken strips. Dry stones shifted under his paws, a rougher sound than concrete, meaner and more honest. Nola came with them, eyes down, not at the runner, not at Holt, not at the open car. Nola crouched near the first disturbed patch and brushed dust off the side of one stone with the back of her glove. She did not photograph it. She did not ask for a tablet. She looked at the platform concrete. Then the ballast, then the narrow service side shadow beyond the rail. Rivet moved 3 slow steps, stopped, and checked back. His ears changed first, then his breathing. Too many layers had crossed there. Train heat, rubber, disinfectant, human fear, old oil baked into dry stone. Cassia let him think with his body and did not hurry him. Nola noticed. Your dog trusts gravel more than my degree. Cassia kept her eyes on Rivet. Gravel lies less. Nola made a sound that might have been a laugh if the night had been less mean. Her glove touched a faded service marking painted low beside the track, barely more than a pale line in dust. The pause lasted half a second. Cassia saw it anyway. Old knowledge had a way of putting its hand on a person's throat before it spoke. Nola's shoulders tightened, then loosened by force. A young security corporal came up behind Holst's line with a slate clamped in one fist. He was too young to hide how scared he was and too trained to admit it. Mom, the manifest says they were inside when the train cleared the last check. Holt was close enough to hear, close enough to approve the question without owning it. The corporal swallowed and glanced at the slate again. One name was flagged for route testimony, he added. Oren Mazur, railside witness. The notation is thin, but it is there. Nola's fingers stopped over the dust for a single beat. Cassia saw that too. She filed it away with the service marking, the empty bunks, and the dog refusing the obvious world. She did not turn the boy into a lesson. Humiliation was cheap, and cheap things broke under weight. Then the manifest is late, she said. Hold your lane. Watch the platform faces, not the dog. His jaw worked once. He nodded and backed into position. Rivet moved again, then stalled at the edge of a second disturbance where the stones had been pressed deep in 2 uneven tracks. Not footprints. Weight. Carried weight changed the music underfoot. It made ballast crunch, low and flat instead of sharp. Nola's eyes narrowed, but she did not give the lecture her mouth wanted. She looked past the platform lights toward the siding, where the rail cars sat dark and long, with gaps a man could mistake for safety. Cassia felt Holt waiting for a cleaner answer. Clean answers were getting people killed tonight. The first impact hit a freight frame near the siding with a hard crack. Not close enough to kill, close enough to steer. A guard flinched toward the sound. Cassia caught the movement and cut her hand down again. Don't give them your eyes. Another strike sparked off a low rail brace beyond the freight line, and the platform suddenly understood it had been looking the wrong way. Holt saw and started to push two men forward. Cassia stopped him with one sentence. You flood that side, you blind this one. He hated the arithmetic, but heard it. His support shrank to a held line and bad options. Rivet pulled once toward the disturbed ballast, then hesitated when the echo rolled back from below, thin and sideways. Nola rose with care, still looking at the service marking. This is not platform movement, she said. Cassia already knew. The empty car, the bare floor, the wrong-way dog, the careful knock, the pressed ballast, the staged runner, the threat near siding. None of it pointed to the doors built for passengers. It pointed to the route built for everything people pretended not to see. Under the platform edge, the cold air moved again, carrying the faint tick of something shifting below the place. Holt could not flood without drowning his own answer in panic. The tick below the platform came again as Cassia stepped off the last clean strip of concrete and into the freight siding. Dry ballast rolled under her boots, loose enough to punish hurry. Behind her, Holt's line held the lit platform with too many lights pointed at the wrong emptiness. Ahead, the rail yard went narrow and long, all cold steel and black gaps, the kind of place that made a straight path look honest. Rivet pulled low, then checked back before committing, breath quick against the harness. Cassia felt the hesitation in her palm more than saw it. The medical car's brake heat faded behind them, replaced by cold air sliding under the train and carrying sound sideways. The tick did not come from the platform. It lived below, where the service trench ran under the visible order of the station. Nola moved beside Cassia with one hand out for balance, watching the ground before the shadows. The old signal bridge rose ahead, dark ribs over the siding, vibrating faintly whenever the train settled. It made the whole yard feel awake in a bad mood. Cassia did not like leaving Holt with less support, but the platform was the show. The route was somewhere uglier, and already moving. Nola stopped where the ballast dipped beside a low service cover. Rail yards are filing cabinets for people with worse shoes. Her voice stayed dry, but her eyes did not. She was reading the place the way Cassia read a window, a roofline, a gap between two light poles. That is not an exit path, Nola said. That is a carrying path. She pointed with two fingers, not at the open cut between cars, but at the scuffed shoulder beside it, where dust had been pressed flat instead of kicked aside. Cassia had already found the sight line beyond the signal bridge. It was almost perfect. A long lane, a dark mouth at the far end, enough light to tempt a person into believing the yard wanted to be understood. Staged lanes always had that little kindness to them. Still, her attention went there first. It always did. Nola saw the turn of her head. Straight tracks make people trust straight answers. No lecture. Just the slap of it. Rivet sneezed once, then stiffened. Somewhere ahead, a rail support shrieked against its housing, short and sharp. Not loud enough to be a signal, rough enough to cut through a dog's focus. Rivet lost the line at once. His head came up, ears hard, breath turning shallow. She swung toward the sound, then back toward the ballast, then back to Cassia, caught between work and noise. Cassia lowered her hand to the top of his harness and held steady pressure there. A reset, not a cuddle. He did not need comfort that confused the job. Easy, she said, almost under the rail yard's breath. She did not send him. A good dog with bad noise in his head was still a dog, not a machine with fur and teeth. The old handler in her memory would have known that. Cassia made herself know it now. Nola shifted left, putting a rail support between herself and the tempting lane. Cassia took half a step to open her own angle and saw movement where no evacuee should have been. A shoulder, maybe, or a sleeve sliding behind a stack of service crates near the trench mouth. The shape froze when she did. That told her enough. A frightened evacuee folded inward. This one held still like a man counting distance. Cassia did not take the bait. She cut her hand low, and Nola stopped moving. Rivet trembled once under her palm and stayed. The shape broke right, fast and wrong, trying to pull their eyes toward the open lane. Cassia moved only her voice. Nola low cover, Rivet hold. The commands were short enough to survive fear. The man, if it was a man, vanished behind the service crates, and a second knock answered from beneath the trench cover, closer now. Cassia tracked the movement without chasing it. Chasing was how a team entered someone else's math. She shifted Holt's men by radio only as far as she dared, keeping them on the platform edge, refusing to spend bodies on a route she did not understand yet. The return hissed with a curse from Holt, then discipline. Nola reached the trench side and crouched, one knee in dry dust, her fingertips hovering over marks that ran against normal platform traffic. They did not step off, she said. They were moved through before the platform had a chance to count them. The words landed cold and simple. Not a full answer. Worse, a working one. Under the service trench, beneath the signal bridge vibration and the dying brake heat, someone coughed once, tried to stop, and coughed again. The second cough came from under the service trench, low and raw, then broke into a wet little gasp the person tried to swallow. Cassia held Rivet at her knee and listened past him. There were two sounds now. The survivor below, and foot movement outside the trench line, light enough to be careful, heavy enough to carry intent. Nola pointed toward a maintenance shed half sunk beside the service route, its door hanging crooked, its skin dusted white by ballast grit. The cough came again from behind it. Rivet pulled that way, body tight, nose working through dry iron, old rubber, cold air, and human fear. He had something. Presence, breathing, and terrified. Not an answer. Cassia gave him enough lead to mark the shed corner, then stopped him before his momentum made the choice for everyone. A man's breath hitched inside. He saw Stog first. That was clear from the sound he made. Not words. Just terror, stripped down and useful. Rivet stiffened, waiting for a cue. Cassia did not give one. Back, she said softly. He came off the corner, reluctant but clean. Nola slid to the outside wall, eyes on the dark rail structure beyond them. Cassia went in without Rivet. The shed smelled of dust, hot brake iron cooling into cold, and old grease soaked into boards that had not been meant for people. A man was wedged behind a rack of service tools, one arm clamped around his ribs, one shoe gone, face gray with pain and fear. Adult. Mid-40s, maybe, shaking hard. Not a child dragged into the story for easy mercy. His scared eyes jumped from Cassia to the door, then to the space where Rivet was not. Dog stays out, Cassia said. So do speeches. The man tried to pull farther back and hit the wall with a dull sound. She did not crowd him. Fear had geometry too. Push wrong and it closed every route. Outside, Rivet huffed once, unhappy but holding. Nola said something too low to hear, then shifted a loose panel with a careful scrape, making a little more cover at the shed's open side. Cassia lowered herself to a knee, hands visible, the way she would approach a bad wire in a room full of tired people. 19 came in, she said. How many left with you? The man shook his head hard. They took the quiet ones. His voice barely made it past his teeth. Cassia let the sentence sit. Nola went still outside. The man swallowed and tried again. Loud ones slowed them. Hurt ones, people who cried. His eyes flicked toward the rail line, then back to Cassia as if expecting punishment to come from either direction. Quiet ones walked. He coughed into his sleeve and left red there. Cassia did not ask him to explain his blood. That would only buy useless panic. "Who led them?" she asked. He shook his head. "Not led, chosen." A service latch script outside, farther right than Nola. Cassia raised 2 fingers low, and Nola answered with 1 tap against the shed wall. The survivor whispered faster. One man kept counting, wheels, doors, turns. He kept counting wheels, doors, turns. The phrase came out like a prayer he hated. They heard him. They wanted him quiet most. Oren Mazur, Cassia thought. Root witness. Not just a name on a late manifest. Cassia felt the shape of the night change. Not all 19 were the same problem. Someone had sorted people by weight, fear, and usefulness. That was not panic. That was doctrine. The shadow outside crossed the shed opening too fast. Cassia moved the survivor down with her shoulder, not gently enough to be pretty, gently enough to keep him breathing. Something struck the rack above them and showered dust into her hair. Rivet hit the end of his restraint outside and barked once, sharp with frustration. "Hold," Cassia snapped, and the bark cut off. Nola slammed the loosened panel sideways into the narrow gap between the and the rail support. It rang like a bell and stopped a body on the other side with a grunt. A collision. A bad angle. A person losing air. Cassia drove forward through the dust, used the shed post to change the man's line, and sent him stumbling back out instead of deeper in. Pain flashed up her forearm where the rack caught her sleeve. Nola hissed and shoved the panel again, buying 2 seconds at a cost Cassia heard in her breath. The survivor curled around his ribs on the floor. "Name," Cassia said. "The counting man." He squeezed his eyes shut. Oren Mazur." They said he was the one who remembered the route. Outside, the blocked man retreated into the rail noise, and the yard suddenly had a target. Oren Mazur. The name put a shape on the night, and Cassia hated how quickly shp became direction. Direction was comforting. Comfort got people killed. The survivor curled around his ribs in the shed while Nola sealed the gap with one shoulder against bent metal, breathing through her teeth. Outside, the blocked man had gone silent, but not far. The service route ahead opened into a straight run between 2 freight lines, exposed enough to feel usable. Dry ballast sloped away from the shed, then flattened into a narrow lane that ran toward a darker switching apron. A smear of dust crossed it. 2 dragged marks. One lighter set beside them, fast and long. Oren, maybe. Or the people carrying him. Rivet leaned toward it, then stopped, with one paw lifted, body split between the fresh human scent and the noise rolling back from the siding. Cassia felt Holt's distant pressure without needing the radio. Every second gave the man with Oren more ground. Nola saw the lane too and shook her head. "No," she said. "Too straight." Cassia kept moving. "He is getting distance. That is why it looks generous." The words were thin around Nola's breath. Cassia should have heard the pain in them as part of the warning. The lane gave Cassia a tempting red. This time the stakes crowded her judgment. She could see down it. She could cover Nola, keep Rivet out of the deepest shadow, and close on whoever had Oren before the route split again. That was the lie she wanted. Rivet checked back, ears hard, then pulled toward the marks and away from them in the same breath. Scent layers crossed there, old platform fear mixed with newer sweat, rubber, dust, and something sharp from heated brake dust. He did not warn her. He did not approve. He gave her a problem with 4 legs and honest confusion. Nola limped after her, one hand still scraped raw from the shed panel. You keep reading angles. I'm reading what the steel lets people carry. The words should have slowed Cassia. They almost did. Then a scrape sounded ahead, the lightest sign of movement, and the line of sight gave her a quick answer. Oren was moving away from them. Or someone wanted her to believe he was. Cassia chose the clearer sign. She hated herself a little before the choice even finished. The lane folded on them halfway through. Nothing grand. Nothing theatrical. A chain snapped loose above shoulder height and swung out of the dark with a noise like a door being torn open. Cassia dropped under it by instinct, but the ballast rolled under her heel and stole the good part of the movement. Rivet barked once, checked hard to her left, then lost the thread when a second's clanged off a freight frame behind them. Bodies moved in the narrow. One shape flashed between cars, low and fast. Another shoved a service cart into the lane, not to hit square, just to break pace and split eyes. Cassia caught the cart with her hip and went down on one knee, pain biting deep enough to make the yard go white at the edges. Dust jumped around her boots. The chains swung back and slapped the frame behind her. She saw a man at the far end, with one arm hooked around a smaller figure, moving deeper into the yard. Oren stumbled once. The man did not slow. Movement over men. Cassia raised her line, then saw Nola crossing into it. Nola hit Cassia from the side before the second strike came through. It knocked Cassia clear and drove Nola hard against the rail brace. The sound out of her was small and furious. Real. Worse than any dramatic cry would have been. Her left side caught the brace first, then her hip, then one knee. The brace hummed with the impact. For 1 second, Nola's mouth opened and no sound came out at all. She folded around her ribs and still shoved Cassia's shoulder toward cover. Move, Nola said, as if the word cost rent. Rivet came back to Cassia's knee, shaking with the effort of staying under command. Eyes flicking between Nola, the vanishing scent, and the pressure lane that had lied to all of them. His checkback hit harder than a mistake. The dog had not failed. Cassia had chosen which uncertainty to ignore. Cassia dragged Nola behind the brace as another impact rang off the rail where Cassia had been a breath earlier. Nola tried to plant her left foot and lost half a beat. Her face tightened, then flattened with discipline. The man at the far end pulled Oren past a dark switch stand and into deeper shadow. More distance. More route. More time lost. Cassia saw it then with the cold cruelty failure offered after it had already taken payment. She had read the lane like a sniper. Angle, exposure, cover, line. Nola had read the burden. The path had never been for carrying a frightened man. It had been built to carry Cassia's attention. Rivet gives behavior, she said, voice low. I make the mistake. They left the lane without dignity, which was usually the safest way to leave a bad idea. Cassia took Nola's weight under one arm and kept Rivet close with the other hand. Moving toward the old signal bridge where the supports threw broken cover across the service path. Nola could walk, but the left side of her body had gone tight and wrong, each step coming a beat late. She did not complain. That was how Cassia knew it hurt. Above them, the bridge vibrated with small shivers from the cooling train and distant yard movement. The dry air under it tasted of dust and old electricity. Somewhere behind them, a sweep moved through the lane they had abandoned. 2 footfalls. A pause, then a service rod tapping rail, searching, without wanting to sound like searching. It came closer than before, close enough that a small stone shifted under somebody's boot on the other side of a bridge pier. Nola's weight changed against Cassia's arm. Rivet heard it too. His shoulder tightened under the harness. Holt's radio broke in and out at Cassia's shoulder, clipped by the bridge and distance. He asked for status. Cassia gave him the only useful piece. Still moving. Then she cut the channel before concern became orders. Orders from the platform were heavier than help now. The enemy had Orin. The obvious route was dead. Nola was hurt because Cassia had needed an answer too badly. Rivet's breathing had gone rough from the staged noise and fast ground. Cassia stopped behind a bridge pier just long enough to reset him. Not a rest. A reset. She touched the harness, then offered the worn rubber reward from her pocket. Rivet took it in his mouth and held it without chewing. His jaw locked harder than it should have, the rubber creaking once between his teeth. His eyes still worked the dark. One shoulder kept a small vibration, as if the last impact had stayed in the muscle after the sound had passed. "Easy," Cassia said. He checked her face once, found no panic there, and lowered his head again. She did not call him fine. He was working. There was a difference. And pretending otherwise was how handlers got dogs hurt. Nola leaned against the pier, with the kind of smile people used when they were refusing to fall. Her boots slipped on dust, and her hand shot to the bridge support. Pain crossed her face so fast a kinder person might have pretended not to see it. "If I fall over," she said, "assume I meant to inspect the floor." Cassia looked at the blood on Nola's sleeve and the dust on her cheek. "If I start giving a speech, shoot the radio." Nola gave a short breath that was almost laughter and absolutely pain. Another sound crossed the bridge above them, faint and deliberate. Not a bang this time. A careful foot on grating, then silence. The sweep was not gone. It had simply decided to be patient. Cassia hated patient enemies. They made fewer mistakes and ruined the mood, such as it was. Nola touched the bridge pier with 2 fingers, then the low marking half hidden behind flaked paint. The gesture had memory in it. Not guilt in the courtroom sense. Not confession. Something older and more useful. "There was an exercise model," she said. "Years ago, same kind of hub, same ugly problem. Medical movement, service throat, too many eyes on the platform." She swallowed whatever the injury wanted from her and kept talking in pieces, each one cut short by listening. "We built a route no one loved. Slow, awkward, bad for running, good for carrying." Cassia did not ask why Nola had not said it sooner. The answer was under their boots in the failed lane, in the way old knowledge waited until it hurt enough to become honest. Footsteps passed beyond the pier. Cassia held still. Rivet held with her, reward still clamped in his mouth. His breathing evened by degrees, not quickly and not for free. Nola waited until the sound moved off. "I saw the marking near the ballast," she said. "I hoped I was wrong." "Hope later," Cassia said. "What does the steel allow?" Nola looked at her then. "Not forgiven. Not accused. Working. The fast path cannot carry Orin clean," Nola said. "Not if he is resisting. Not if he is hurt. Not if they want him alive." She angled her hand away from the straight lane toward a lower service cover that sat half-shadowed beyond the bridge. "They need the route that lets 2 people move 1 living weight without looking like 2 people moving 1 living weight." Tick. Cassia thought of the survivor whispering through blood and dust. Wheels, doors, turns. Orin counting rhythm, because files could be taken and radios could lie, but a man who had lived rail timing carried it in his bones. He knew a siding number, Cassia said, or a rhythm close enough to 1. Nola nodded once. Then he will count what they give him, if he can. The ugly route did not point toward speed. It bent under the bridge, across dry surface cover, then toward a darker section where platform light could not flatten faces or comfort fools. Rivet shifted, tired but steady. Cassia took back the reward, let him breathe, then gave him the line. "We stopped chasing scent," she said. We chase what Bram can physically carry. Nola pushed off the pier, pale and upright. The bridge hummed above them as they moved into the worse answer. The loading apron waited beyond the service cover, broad enough to invite speed and cluttered enough to punish it. Cassia hated both facts. Nola moved on Cassia's left, with one hand pressed low against her ribs, pale but upright, the kind of upright that took work. Rivet kept his head down, but the earlier stress had left a tremor under his control. He was still carrying the night in his breath. The ugly root bent along the apron edge, where old rubber marks and dry grit made a dull skin over the concrete. Ahead, a sheet slammed somewhere behind stacked rail equipment. The sound cracked across the yard and bounced under the train beds. Rivet's body surged before his mind caught up. Cassia took the harness close and checked him with her hip, harder than she liked. He nearly broke position anyway, claws scraping, breath punching out. Another sheet slam followed, farther left. Too loud. Too staged. Sound was being used, like light had been used on the platform. Pull the eyes. Pull the dog. Pull the woman holding both together. Cassia slowed one step for Rivet, then another for Nola. It cost distance. She felt it leave them, quiet and expensive. A man appeared beyond the apron, half lit between two service frames, moving with the clear arrogance of bait. Not the runner from the platform. This one knew where the shadows started and stopped. He gave Cassia enough of himself to make the shot tempting. Past him, a darker movement dragged deeper toward the low annex route. Nola saw it too and shifted, injured side first, because apparently common sense had died of neglect. Rivet pulled toward the sheet slam again, then checked back hard enough to twist the lead. Nola was inside the same bad math, too close to the lane Cassia would have to own if she took the target. Cassia saw the target, the risk, the dog's overload, Nola's bad footing, the gap behind the man, all at once. The world narrowed and offered her the old, pretty answer. A clean shot. A clean report. A lie with good lighting. Somewhere beyond the equipment stack, a voice carried, low and certain. She won't take the shot. Bram, or one of his men repeating what Bram had already decided. Cassia did not give the voice the dignity of surprise. A clean shot is how amateurs get invited, she said, and kept her finger quiet. The target vanished the instant she refused him. That was the price. Bram's people had bought a full second with her restraint, and in a yard like this, 1 second was a country. A shadow slipped through a side exit between apron wall and service frame. Cassia gave Rivet the cue low and sharp, not a release into violence, a block into space. Rivet moved on command, driving his body across the opening with a hard, controlled stop that made the escaping man check his stride. The dog took the pressure badly but cleanly, shoulder hitting the frame with a thud that turned Cassia's stomach cold. He held. Nola used the opening before Cassia could tell her not to. She drove herself across the narrow angle, caught the service frame with one hand, and shoved loose equipment into the path with her good side. Pain broke through her face, quick and rough, then disappeared under discipline. The man cursed and backed out of the gap. Cassia moved the team with voice and position, not fire, forcing the enemy deeper rather than letting him split them apart. The target they had not taken was gone. The route ahead had swallowed him. So had the man with Oren. Then Oren's voice came through the structure, muffled by distance and the annex wall, close enough to be real and too far to save. 3 doors, he called, or maybe 3 more. The words broke under a hand or a strike or his own lack of air. Cassia could not tell. Rivet looked back at her, breathing hard. One foreleg held a fraction too carefully before he set it down again. Not broken. Not fine. The categories people liked for damage were useless here. Nola leaned against the service frame and swallowed pain like it was a job requirement. Beyond them, Bram's people moved one layer deeper, carrying Oren through the route that did not care about speed, only weight and timing. The yard gave another smaller groan, satisfied with itself. Cassia felt the pattern settle. Bram had learned she would not risk Rivet. He had learned she would not trade Nola for a beautiful shot. He had learned enough to make the next bait meaner. She tightened the lead, checked Rivet's stance, and looked toward the annex shadows where Oren's voice had died. Close was not rescue. Close was just another way to be late. Nola found the ugly route by refusing to look where a tired person wanted to look. The service trench ran forward in a crooked line toward the loading annex, then seemed to offer a cleaner cut beside stacked frames and old apron lights. That was the route Cassia's eyes wanted. It had space. It had angle. It had just enough open ground to promise control. Nola ignored it and pointed to a lower bend half hidden by breakhouse shadow, where the ground looked stupid and mean. "There," she said. Her voice had gone thin around the edges, but it still carried that dry, practical insult she reserved for bad design and worse people. "Don't flatter the track. It's dumb. People are the problem." Cassia followed the point and saw nothing heroic. The path dipped through dry grit, past a service lip, cut around a rusted barrier, and made everyone using it slower. Which meant it could hide the labor of carrying a living man. It was awkward, exposed in the wrong places, and miserable underfoot. Viable. Bram would take viable if it protected the objective. Cassia let the cleaner line die in her head. It was harder than it should have been. "Your route," she said. Nola's mouth twitched. Awful taste, good survival. Rivet slowed at the first bend. Slowed, but did not stop. His breath had turned rough, and the ballast was taking payment from his feet with every step. Cassia felt the old urge to push, to spend the dog now and apologize later to whatever part of herself kept score. She did not. She shortened the pace and let the team lose another sliver of time on purpose. Rivet kept working, head low, but the rhythm changed. Nola saw the choice and did not thank her, which Cassia appreciated. Gratitude would have been too expensive. They found the first sign near the service lip, dust pressed into a wide smear. Not kicked up, grit crushed deep in paired, uneven pauses, one mark where a heel had dragged and been lifted again. Carried weight. Living weight, if the survivor had been right and the man had resisted even a little. Cassia crouched, touched nothing, and made herself read through Nola's logic. Not where a runner would go. Not where a shooter would stage. Where two people could move one man and still keep a hand free for fear. Nola leaned close enough to see, breath catching once from pain. "That is not a chase line," she said. "That is a burden line." Ahead, cold sound moved sideways under the annex. The next clue was human, not an object left conveniently for people who enjoyed insulting reality. It came as a broken rhythm through structure and air, a voice too low to carry words at first, then counting. Door turn, 3. Silence. A scrape. Then again, weaker. Door, turn. Oren was not leaving them a trail like a hero in a children's story. He was doing what he knew how to do under terror, measuring the route by rhythm and repetition. Cassia held the team still just long enough to hear, and no longer. Near the break house approach, a shape moved behind a gap in the siding wall. Too close. The planning window slammed shut. Nola grabbed Cassia's sleeve with 2 fingers and pointed to the lower bend without looking at her. Rivet lifted his head, ready to follow the louder movement. Cassia checked him with the harness and set him back into the slower line. Somewhere ahead, Oren's voice cracked into one clear sentence. "I know the siding number. I wish I didn't." The words were almost swallowed at once, but not before they did their damage. Nola's eyes sharpened. He knows where they are taking him. Cassia nodded. Then we make sure he keeps breathing long enough to hate it. The break house crouched beyond the loading annex like something the yard had forgotten to remove. Its shadow covered the final approach, and that was where Bram would make the next offer. Cassia could feel it before she saw it, the open slice of ground. The place a target could appear cleanly, the line designed for her and not for Oren. Bram had learned the shape of her restraint and was arranging the world around it like furniture. A man crossed briefly near the annex edge. Just enough to say he could be taken if she was willing to ignore everything that had already hurt them. Rivet felt the motion and leaned forward. Nola shifted her weight and failed to hide the pain this time. Her injured foot dragged a little on the grit before she corrected it. Cassia slowed one more step, keeping both of them inside the same small piece of survivable ground. They had the route now. They also had the cost of finding it. A tired dog, an injured rail specialist, a missing witness counting his fear into useful pieces, and an enemy who knew exactly what Cassia would not trade away. The annex lights flickered once behind dirty glass. Beyond them, someone dragged a frame across concrete, setting the bait where it could shine. Bram moved Oren through the loading annex with no hurry in his face and too much hurry in his hands. He was a lean shape in the dirty light. One arm locked around Oren's coat, two men bracketing the break house door behind him. The final transfer route waited beyond that door, low and dark. With the service lane bending out toward a place Holt's platform lights could not reach. Bram gave Cassia the shot before he gave his men the order. He stepped into a clear slice of space beside the annex frame, head and shoulder exposed, the line so perfect it felt drawn for her. Oren sagged between grips, gray with exhaustion, but his lips still moved. Counting. Still counting, stubborn as a nail in bad wood. Nola saw the route before Cassia let herself believe it. Left of the break house, she said, voice thin. They cannot carry him through the center gap. Too narrow if he fights. Her hand was pressed so hard against her ribs that her knuckles looked pale under dust. She shifted her weight anyway, reading the carriers, not Bram. One carrier favored his right side. The other kept glancing at the door. They would have to adjust before the threshold. They would have to show the seam. Rivet pulled once at the harness, then coughed air back through his teeth. The annex echoed around them, frame and breath and fear bouncing off the low walls. Bram looked across the lane and understood that Cassia had seen him. The shot was beautiful. That was the problem. Beautiful shots made clean stories for people who had not been there. They did not show the dog shaking after impact, or Nola's breath catching on every step, or Oren being dragged through a door if everyone looked at the wrong man at the right second. Bram's mouth moved. Move the living weight first. His men adjusted around Oren, not around Bram. That told Cassia where the value was. Not the leader. Not the bait. The man being carried. The route being protected. Nola shifted toward the left carry line, hurt enough that her face had gone flat. Cassia saw the calculation in her body before she saw the movement. Nola was putting herself where the carriers would have to change hands. One more step and she would be inside the pain, with no promise of getting out of it upright. Rivet leaned toward Bram, then checked back, overloaded but still waiting for Cassia to make the harder choice. The clean shot sat in front of her like a dare. Cassia lowered the line a fraction and took Bram's face out of the center of the world. I don't shoot to decorate a report. No one answered. They did not need to. The refusal cost them. Bram moved and Oren disappeared half a step closer to the breakhouse door. Cassia shaped the lane with voice, motion, and threat. making Bram's men turn their shoulders where they wanted them square, making their feet choose the bad ground Nola had already named. She stepped into a sight line just long enough to make the near carrier flinch inward, then shifted off it before the move became a target. Her voice closed one exit and opened another. Nola left Rivet hold the side. The carriers reacted to pressure. They did not have time to understand. The near-side man turned his shoulder to shield Oren. That put his weight on the bad patch. The far-side man reached to correct him. That opened the seam Nola had predicted. Nola moved despite the injury, not fast, not clean, but exactly where the carrying line needed to break. Oren heard her before he saw her. His head lifted. His mouth worked under bruised breath. "Door," he rasped. "Turn." He counted once more, almost too low to hear. Now. He let his knees go loose on the beat he had made for himself. Not heroic. Survival math. Dead weight arrived at the worst possible moment for the men holding him. The near-side carrier stumbled. Cassia gave Rivet the cue. He drove into the side exit and blocked it with his body. A controlled stop that slammed him against the frame and made him yelp once before he locked down again. The sound hit Cassia under the ribs. She kept moving. There was no room to look at him yet. That would be the next pain. This one still needed finishing.
Nola shoved into the gap with her good shoulder, caught Oren's sleeve, and paid for it with a sound she would hate later. The break house filled with dust, hard breathing, and bodies losing balance. One man hit the annex wall. Another tried to recover Oren by force and got only Nola's boot and the frame swinging back into him. No clean technique. Just impact, timing, and everyone running out of air. Oren twisted at the count he had made for himself, small and exhausted, enough to free one arm. I stayed quiet, because the first man who shouted stopped breathing. He gasped, as if confession could be used as leverage. Maybe it could. Bram lost the route before he lost the man. That was the real defeat, and Cassia saw the moment he knew it. His eyes went not to Oren first, but to the break house door, the service latch, the exposed bend behind it. The route was no longer quiet. The transfer was no longer deniable. Oren alive meant the path had a witness with rhythm in his head and fear sharpened into memory. Oren was down behind Nola, alive, shaking, furious with fear. Rivet staggered out of the side exit block and set his weight unevenly, then stood. Standing was enough for now, though Cassia hated that sentence the moment she thought it. Nola had one hand on Oren and the other wrapped around her ribs, her face wet with sweat under the annex light. Bram had one more opening. A final slice through breakhouse shadow, narrow and mean, just enough for him to run. Cassia saw his back turn, saw the shot arrive, clear in the old, tempting way. She also saw Rivet between angles, Nola bent over Oren, and the last loose man reaching for the service latch that would keep the route alive after tonight. She chose the team. She drove the loose man off the latch with movement and pressure. Not a trophy shot, and shoved the route into useless noise, exposed, contested, burned. Bram vanished into the outer dark, without Oren, without the objective, without the clean continuation he had built the night around. Cassia wanted the final shot for one ugly second. Then Rivet leaned wrong, Nola almost went down, and Oren breathed. That had to be enough. It was never enough. It was still the win. The train did not sound hollow anymore. That was the first mercy, and it was not soft. Living people made ugly noise when they were carried back into a medical car after a night like that. coughing, crying, swearing under sedatives, asking the same names twice because fear did not trust answers the first time. The loud ones the capture cell had abandoned came up from service-side shelters and trench pockets in pieces, escorted by shaking guards and medics who had stopped pretending the platform was the center of the problem. Blankets went around shoulders. Boots scraped metal steps. Someone retched behind a wheel cart and apologized to nobody useful. Cassia stood beside the open car and listened to the sound change. Bunks took weight. Straps clicked around actual bodies. The car's echo narrowed, filled by breath and pain, and the stubborn human refusal to disappear neatly. Even when frightened men tried to make absence look orderly. Oren sat on the low step under a blanket, both hands wrapped around a paper cup he had not drunk from. His face had the color of old ash, but his eyes stayed open. Nola sat 2 feet away because lying down would have made sense, and Nola had apparently declared war on sense. Holt's people sealed the service edge without making a ceremony of it. Good. Ceremony was what people invented when they wanted distance from mess. The route under the platform was burned for the night, exposed by movement. Marked by bodies, fouled by broken frame pieces and panic, 2 watched now to be useful to Bram's network before morning. Somewhere beyond the outer yard, a transfer vehicle rolled away with nothing inside that mattered. No, Oren. No quiet asset. No clean continuation. Bram had lost the objective, not the world, and Cassia was too tired to pretend those were the same thing. Oren noticed her looking toward the dark service line. "If I tell you," he said, voice scraped thin, "they come back for the rest." Cassia nodded once. "Then tell it to people who can keep it alive." Paperwork would come. Custody would come. Men with warmer rooms and cleaner hands would act as if the route became real when entered into a system. Fine. Let them have their little ritual. The climax had already happened in dust and cold iron, where systems were mostly late and people bled on schedule. Rivet refused the reward. Is less than #0. 3 hashes greater than Cassia offered the worn rubber piece, and he took it for half a second, then let it drop to the platform between his feet. That landed harder than a wine would have. He stood with his weight a little wrong, eyes still searching the spaces under the train. Body waiting for a cue no one should give him yet. Cassia crouched and ran 2 fingers along the harness, slow enough not to make comfort into another order. "Done," she said. Rivet did not believe her. Fair. Neither did she. Nola watched from the step, one arm held tight against her side, medical tape already losing its fight against dust. "If anyone asks," she said, "I was injured during a deeply stupid inspection of floor quality." Oren blinked at her. Then, against all reasonable advice, he laughed once. It hurt him. It helped anyway. Nola closed her eyes for a beat. "Good," she muttered. "My suffering has range." Rivet finally moved. He did not take the reward. He leaned his shoulder into Cassia's thigh, heavy and warm and still shaking under the skin. A working animal after work that refused to end cleanly. Someone near Holt's line said it quietly, maybe thinking Deloitte made it acceptable. Legend. Cassia did not look over right away. The platform light was still hard and cold. The service route beyond it stayed dark, a black seam under all that official glare, and she could feel it waiting. Larger things waited there too. Routes. Buyers. Men like Bram, or worse men, with better shoes. The train crew called clear, in voices that were not clear at all. The medical car door began to close on living people instead of absence. That was enough to let the night keep breathing. Cassia picked up Rivet's reward and tucked it away. "Don't call me legend unless you plan to disappoint me." Nola opened one eye. "Too late," she said. "I am extremely disappointed in your taste in shortcuts." Cassia almost smiled. Almost was enough. The train started moving, slow at first, no longer empty, carrying pain but carrying it alive. Cassia stayed on the platform with Rivet against her leg, Nola breathing behind her, Orin safe enough for 1 minute. Under the service bridge, the dark root did not vanish. It simply waited for the next person foolish enough to trust a straight answer.